Hey, welcome to Thursday. This is not Tuesday, this is Thursday. Welcome to Thursday. I hope it's a great day for you. Still summertime outside. But I think it's a pretty good day, and I hope it's one that you get to enjoy in a good way. So let it be a blessing to you, and you be a blessing to those around about you. And I'm glad you're with me today, and so I'll ask you again. Come on into my little world for just a moment or two. I was thinking about 1803. Now, I wasn't there. In 1803, then President Thomas Jefferson quietly went to Congress, sent a note to Congress, and asked them for $2,500. Not for himself, but because of the Great Louisiana Purchase, because of the great size of the continent, because of the beginning westward expansion. He wanted $2,500 to finance what we now know as the Lewis and Clark expedition that traveled across the country, going westward, seeking out what was there and making its way to the western coast of what we now know as the United States. I thought about those people who traveled, those men who made their way, who traveled through rivers and over land and went to uncharted, unknown territories for them, who began that, who made their way and mapped the directions and showed the landscape and returned to talk about the marvelous country that they had seen as they traversed. You think about that statement, or the statements they made, and I think about the statement that we find in the 11th chapter of Hebrews that talks about Abraham talking about going out not knowing where he was going. Think about how many people have followed after him. What a thought it is. And I'm reminded that in the 12th chapter of Hebrews, in the second verse, in what is referred to as the New Revised Standard Version, it refers to Jesus, and I believe the New International Version originally had it that way, the pioneer of our faith. Looking to Jesus, many translations say author and finisher, but some of them say the pioneer. I just love that word, pioneer. The one who blazed the trail, who marked the trees, who went along the path, who went where no one had gone before, at least no one they knew. And that pioneering, trailblazing spirit set a path that others could follow after. Jesus had said that where I am, there you may be also. A trailblazer that calls others to follow after. That's what the Lewis and Clark expedition did in this country. Set that westward trail. People after that began to make their journeys westward. And as the 19th century progressed, people moved onward and onward, heading across the country, going from Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, making their way from Virginia across the country to parts unknown to them. Ultimately, many of them making their way to the West Coast, to Oregon and Northern California, establishing places where people would later live and grow and develop into marvelous parts of this country. Pioneers. Recently I've been reading a book or two about some early pioneers. Only it's a lot of years later, not 1803, but about the late 1950s, really into the 1960s. I believe it was May, wasn't it, of 1961, when Alan Shepard climbed aboard, was put inside that small capsule aboard that Redstone rocket that later would seem so small. One that had been tried and tested, and yes, had a lot of failures along the way. A couple of chimps had been sent and returned. But finally, Alan Shepard made his way into that capsule, launched into space for only a few moments. But he became the pioneer of so many who would follow after. Later, John Glenn would begin to orbit. And so are Americans, following after some others, especially the Russians who had begun their space treks, but launching and going after, and then one after another, these astronauts made their way into space until space travel has become almost commonplace. But think about that man sitting aboard that rocket, waiting as what today is somewhat primitive methods of launching him into space, knowing that any moment it could blow up beneath him. It could go up and it could turn sideways. It could return and crash him to earth in a hurry, and he could be lost and his life would be ended. But because he was willing to go and went and returned, and of course he had other flights later, but as he was willing to do that and be a pioneer, we reached out to threshold beyond the threshold of our world and said, maybe there is something beyond us. Maybe there's something out there. We tested and went further and further and further until by the end of the 1960s, we had made it and men had landed on the moon. When Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon in 1969, 8 years later, from Alan Shepard's first flight, he said, a small step for man, but a giant leap for mankind. And isn't that the pioneering spirit? One step after another, but it pulls with it the hearts and the imaginations of people. And so I go back to Jesus for a moment. And there Jesus crosses the thresholds that we've not even imagined to return with strength, with courage, with power. And Jesus becomes the author, the finisher, the pioneer of our faith, with courage stepping forward and saying, follow after me. We read about those who bravely followed after him. And as the Apostle Paul would later write, be followers of me as I am of Christ, the pioneer of our faith. We need a few pioneers, don't we? You know, the times are not finished and there are new borders to cross still. There are opportunities that are unchallenged yet. And we need the hearts and the minds of people who will pioneeringly grab hold of faith. Faith in God, faith in themselves, faith in the things we studied and understand, to reach beyond the borders that we have known. I don't know what those borders are. I don't know where we would go. But we still need pioneers of hope, of spirit, and of movement. How about you? You just might be that pioneer as well. Hey, it's a great day, and I hope it's one that you get to enjoy in a great way. I'm really glad that you're with me today. And with that pioneering spirit, I tell you what, let's just move forward in the very best way possible. Again, thanks for being with me. We'll talk some more later.